Joining us now, FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried runs a big international crypto exchange. Sam, first of all, how easy is it for these Russian oligarchs to use crypto to hide their wealth and evade sanctions?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the answer today is that it's very difficult to do so. There are a very large number of checks in place to prevent that. Everything from their bank to the bank that they would be wiring money to, that the exchange would be using, doing sanctions checks to the exchanges themselves, doing know your customer processes and sanctions checks on the banks involved and the people involved, doing sanctions checks on the tokens involved and on any transfers going out as well. So there are a lot of processes in place to prevent this from happening, and I think they've been fairly effective at preventing it, although it is only because these processes are in place that it is difficult. A number of years ago, this was a much bigger problem for the space.
Well, and I was wondering because a UN report has said that North Korea, for instance, used stolen cryptocurrency to help fund a missile program, and that Iran mined Bitcoin to help try to evade sanctions. So there is a history here of bad behavior and hiding behind crypto.
Yeah, I think if you rewind to 2017, 2018, the space was a lot weaker in terms of compliance in general and specifically in terms of sanctions checks. This is true basically across the board. And there were also some specific venues that were particularly exploited for this manner. Over the last 4 years, partially because of the work of law enforcement, partially because of the work of regulators, policymakers, and partially because of the work of the industry, a lot of that has gotten cleaned up.
So what about this new bill from Senator Elizabeth Warren? Do you think it is effective in trying to find any of that? And can you trace that? It puts it on the Treasury Secretary to find some instances of Russian oligarchs, for instance, getting around sanctions through crypto.
So, I mean, I'll say, we've been coordinating with all of the relevant sort of enforcement agencies, including people from Treasury on our policies around this. And, I think in general, they've been extremely constructive. I think we've been able to effectively prevent it. We've been able to trace a number of tokens, related to financial crimes and consistently, stop them from being able to cash out, including some of the more high profile ones. So, I think that it is an effective process, although it does take a lot of work, and it's really important that the industry does keep that up and keeps up that cooperation with law enforcement on this so that does remain the case.
Well, I know your industry has found new lobbying power. You've been a big backer of Democratic politicians, President Joe Biden. Have you backed Senator Elizabeth Warren? And why do you go to Democrats typically? Are they friendlier toward Bitcoin regulation?
So I've given to both parties, and I think there's sort of the high-profile donation to Biden, in the presidential election, but more recently, I have given to both sides of the aisle, and some of these are just good governance type donations, looking from both parties at people who just unrelated to crypto. I think will help lead our country in a constructive direction. I think we've also found an increasingly bipartisan approach to cryptocurrencies themselves. I think that wasn't so much the case a year ago. I think there's more of a partisan split, back in 2020 and 2021. But I think both parties have been, in general, pretty constructive on it. And I think that's been reflected in what you see with the executive order. I think it's been reflected in the chatter that you see coming out of Congress, in some of the bills around stablecoin regulation that you see being drafted, all of which I think would help move the space forward. They'd help bring more of the activity back onshore, creating a licensing pathway, while also giving more regulatory oversight and customer protection to the agencies.
What about Senator Warren in particular? Have you given to her?
I don't know that I have. I could look up exactly who I have, and I can't tell you for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, we couldn't find it either. I was looking.
Yeah, it's she's extremely sharp and extremely well informed on a number of things. I think a lot of the points that she brings up are pretty valid. Around there needs to be a conversation around sanctions, and there needs to be strong enforcement on that. I think, as it turns out, this is something that has happened sort of over the last years with the industry. And I think would love to talk with her about that and about what is in place today and what she would like to see in place that isn't there today. But I do think it's a super important point to bring up.